Hello and happy Tuesday, friends. Welcome back to Living on the Verge, where we're paying attention to real life, the fun parts, the messy parts, and what they might be trying to teach us. And I want to start today a little differently. I want to start today with a question. Is there a conversation you've been avoiding? Maybe it's with your spouse. Maybe it's with one of your kids. Maybe it's all your kids and you need a family meeting. Or maybe it's with your boss or one of your coworkers. Maybe your parents or a friend. Or maybe even it's the conversation you've been avoiding with yourself. Because I realized something recently. The conversation usually isn't the hardest part. It's all the things we do before we actually have the conversation, right? The waiting, the wondering, how's this going to go, imagining it, thinking of different scenarios, rehearsing. I'm going to handle it this way, and then I'm going to say this, and then they're going to say this. And then there's my personal favorite, writing an entire story before I actually know the facts. And I'm a little bit embarrassed to say this, but I do this. And I don't know if anybody else does this, but you guys, my brain deserves an Academy Award sometimes because it writes full-length feature films based on little to no information at all. And it boggles the mind, truly. And recently I had one of those moments. Okay, no, recently I've actually had a few. And I started thinking about them and I thought, you know what? This is a perfect opportunity to share with you guys. And here's the funny part. All of these different moments basically taught me the exact same lesson. So today I'm going to tell you about the 3 stories. And even though they are vastly different, they did in fact all teach me the exact same lesson. So, as many of you know, my mom has dementia. And it's been something that she was diagnosed with maybe 3 or 4 years ago. And since then, obviously it has advanced. And so there was this long overdue meeting of the minds / conversation that needed to be had. And my siblings and I finally sat down together to talk about where things really are with mom, you know? And here's the interesting part. I had been wanting a meeting like this for a long time. And I'd actually been asking for more communication, trying to get a hold of my mom. I would love to have more involvement. So my mom's been having trouble with her phone and we've been having a little bit of trouble getting a hold of her. And it's kind of gotten to be an issue where it's causing us to not be able to communicate with her. And so my brother on the group text that we have with my sister, which is where my mom lives, basically, asked for a meeting so we could sit down and kind of get an update on where things were with mom. And again, you think I'd be relieved. I wanted this. Instead, I was really dreading it. I instantly went to a different place in my mind. I got kind of quiet and introspective. And so I had 2 days to think about, what might happen at this meeting. And let me just say this. I love my brother and sister. It's not because I'm afraid of my siblings or because I thought it was going to go south. It wasn't any of those things. I was afraid of what the meeting represented, I think. And, once everyone sits down and says the quiet parts that we've been thinking in our head out loud, it becomes real. Well, the meeting was actually good. Not happy, not easy, but good. And just as I suspected, we are very diplomatic peoples, me and my sibs. There weren't any arguments, no big fights. There were no hurt feelings. There were tears. There was honesty. There was vulnerability. There were a couple of moments of, oh, this is getting a little uncomfortable, and someone would tell a joke to lighten up the moment. But in the end, there was a plan. And so, simply said, we talked about getting mom an Alzheimer's phone, which is going to basically eliminate the issues with being able to get a hold of her. And that's terrific. And I'm thrilled. And we're going to get her a fall alert necklace so that we will know if anything happens to her and she needs more assistance. And we all talked about ways that we could all help a little bit more and kind of band together. And the biggest takeaway was my sister shared how alone she felt carrying so much of this. And we told her that we couldn't read her mind and we want to be a part of this, but if she needs us, she has to tell us. And I think that'll be a work in progress, but she did agree. And we have gotten a great group text going, and we have been keeping in touch since the meeting. And, you know, it doesn't change where mom's at, but it changes the approach. And if it serves to make my sister feel less alone and make me feel less disconnected and make my brother feel more in the know of what's actually going on, then it's a win all around, right? It was probably the healthiest conversation we've had about mom. And we're not unrealistic about where things are, you know? It was good. But I woke up the next morning, you guys, just feeling off, melancholy. My husband was like, "What's up? You're very quiet. You're acting very different." And so I was kind of like melancholy, but anxious at the same time. And I kind of couldn't put my finger on it. And I'm kind of introspective. So it bothers me when I can't identify my feelings, and I'll stay with it for a minute until I can figure it out. And then it hit me. For months and months, I've been saying I wanted more access to my mom. I want to talk to her. I want to bring her food. I want to brush her hair. I want to listen to stories that she remembers from years gone by. Well, I got my wish. But the thing is, wishes don't always arrive wrapped the way we imagine them, right? Because more access also means watching dementia up close. And I've done it before with my husband's parents, and it was not easy. And I think that was a moment that was quite sobering, making me realize it. And the conversation didn't make that true, but it simply made me stop pretending it wasn't true. In some ways, checking in on the phone, not frequently, but consistently, worked. It worked for my mom, and it worked for myself, and it worked for my brother, but it was no longer working for my sister, and it's not working for us as a group and as a family for what's best for mom. And so I am so glad. And you know what, you guys? I realized something. It wasn't the conversation that exhausted me. It was the story I had been carrying beforehand. The speculation, the rehearsing, the playing it out in our mind. And that's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. And I caught myself doing it again. In our second story, a completely different part of my life, for a little while, a friendship felt different. The rhythm had changed. And because there was no explanation, there was no, hey, I'm going to be really busy, or by the way, or you know what, I have to have a come to Jesus moment with you and let you know that I don't really, feel we're as close as we once were, or none of that. And so because there was no explanation, my brain volunteered one, right? I know, I'll tell you what's really going on. And if I'm being honest, it didn't volunteer one. It volunteered about 12 iterations of what could be possibly happening. I started wondering, did I do something? Is the friendship changing? Should I say something? No, I'm not going to say anything. Come on, you're being ridiculous. Should I leave it alone? Well, if I leave it alone, then they're going to think I don't care. Maybe they're waiting for me to say something. Sound familiar, any of this? The funny thing is, not long after this entire thing played out in my mind, and it happened over the course of a few days, we ended up spending time together. And you know what? Everything was completely normal. We laughed, we hugged, we had missed each other. We had a great time, just the way we always do. We felt comfortable. And it turns out life had simply been busy. And I realized how close I came to borrowing pain from a story I had written instead of waiting for reality. You guys, that doesn't mean friendships never change. They do. And I've experienced that in the past and even recently. Shit happens. Sometimes you might realize that you're really not vibing with that person. Or maybe you are in a different place as far as priorities. Or maybe it's financial. There are so many reasons why a friendship can change. And they do. But it means I don't have to decide. My mind does not have to live the entire movie and decide what's happening before I actually know what's happening. Then my mind went somewhere completely different. For a while, we've talked, from time to time about sitting down with our boys and walking them through our will and trust someday. Not because we think anything's going to happen tomorrow. Honestly, because life has reminded us that tomorrow isn't something any of us gets to assume. And if I'm really honest, I don't want that conversation. I mean, who does, right? It feels awkward. It feels heavy. Nobody wants to sit around the dinner table talking about what happens after they're gone. But I've started realizing that avoiding a conversation doesn't make it less important. It just makes it someone else's problem later. And I don't want for my boys to someday be grieving us while they're also trying to figure everything else out. That's not a gift I want to leave them. The gift, as hard as it might be, is clarity. The gift is saying, here's where everything is. Here's what we're thinking. Here's what we hope for you. So really, that's not a conversation about death. It's actually a conversation about love. And I think a lot of conversations we avoid, whether it's with our parents or our kids or our spouse or our friends, they aren't really about the topic. They're about the emotions that we attach to that. So here's what I've started asking myself whenever I notice my mind spinning. Like, what am I supposed to get out of all of this, right? And so I have to become more cognizant of not the story, but the facts. So the fact was, my siblings wanted to meet. The story was everything I imagined might happen. And the funny thing is, none of it did. The fact was, my friend had been busy. The story was that our friendship had changed. The fact is, we need to have conversations with our kids about what happens after we're gone. But the story is that talking about it somehow might make it more likely to happen. Our brains don't like blanks, do they? So we fill them in. Sometimes we're right. And you know what? My imagination is so much worse than the truth almost 99% of the time. Sometimes we are spectacularly wrong. The problem is our bodies have a tendency to react to the story as if it's true. Oh boy. And so here's what I'm taking away from all of this. Maybe the conversation you've been avoiding isn't actually the thing stealing your peace. Maybe it's all the stories you've been telling yourself while you've been avoiding it. Because conversations, even the hard ones, usually bring clarity. Silence leaves room for assumptions. And assumptions have a funny way of growing bigger every single day we leave them alone. It's just human nature for our psyche and our imagination to magnify things. So this week, before you write the ending to someone else's story, before you decide what your spouse meant, before you assume you already know why someone did what they did, before you convince yourself you already know how the family meeting is going to go, just stop. Stop. And ask yourself one simple question. What do I actually know? Not what am I afraid of, not what I've imagined, not what I've rehearsed 100 times in my head. What do I actually know? Because I've realized something over the past few weeks. Facts are usually pretty small. It's the stories that we build around them that, oh my gosh, can they become heavy? And maybe, just maybe, that's what paying attention to real life really looks like. Not pretending that everything is okay and not assuming everything's falling apart either. But just being able to be willing to separate the facts from the stories. The truth is, that one shift has changed the way I look at so many situations. And having the courage to have the conversation, but it's okay to wait until the time is right. So, you guys, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Keep paying attention to real life, the fun parts, the messy parts, and what they might be trying to teach us. And until next time, I'll be right here, living on the verge.